Hello and welcome. I'm William Block, the son of W.T. Block, and I'm honored to be here with you today. I want to share with you some of the amazing things my father did and how I'm trying to keep his legacy alive. W.T. was a historian and an author, but that part of his life did not begin right away. After Pearl Harbor, his older brother Everett was drafted, and W.T. decided at that time to volunteer. This screen provides some major bullet points of his life, but I would like to go into a little more detail. I'm grateful to Bill Devey for writing a profile of W.T. in 1996 because he revealed some facts that I wouldn't have known otherwise. One curious thing is how long W.T. stayed at Camp Wallace, which he talks about in his memoir, To Betsy with Love. I'll dive deeper into that later in this talk. This paragraph describes how W.T. inadvertently discovered the forgotten Fort Manhasset by reading a letter from his grandfather. Some of you may remember seeing this on KPAC-TV in August 1970. A backhoe was pressed into the earth, and when it was pulled out, cannonballs fell out onto the ground. The master's thesis that resulted from this experience resulted in W.T.'s first published book. The first 3 published books in red were written on a typewriter, and there are no computer files of this early work. One of my earliest memories of my father was him sitting in his chair in front of a device that looked like this. In the late 1980s, I was starting to write software for a new system called Windows 1.0. In the mid-1990s, I purchased a computer for my father that was running Windows 3.1. Windows at that time came with a simple word processor called Microsoft Write, and W.T. quickly moved into the computer age at that time. I went into a local store called the Byte Shop and found a Windows computer built by Hyundai equipped with a yellow monochrome monitor. Since I was already familiar with Windows and knew it had a word processor built in, I decided to buy one for my father. The image is not the same computer, but that is what it looked like. W.T. immediately fell in love with his new tool, and his typewriter was cast aside. The next 4 slides contain quotes from Bill Devey's profile and describe the financial investment required to make several of these books possible. W.T. retired from the U.S. Post Office in 1973, and at that time, he was earning $18,000 a year. For him to borrow a third of his yearly income to publish his first book is a good indication of the passion he felt for his work at the time. In 1986, Block published Sapphire City of the Natchez, a brief history of Port Neches, Texas, a 456-page effort. The city proclaimed January 22, 1987, to be W.T. Block Day and presented the honoree with a plaque and a check for $500. The city manager raised $14,000 in private subscriptions to publish 1,000 copies. Block's book Sour Lake, Texas, From Mud Baths to Millionaires, 1835 to 1909 was published in July 1995 by the Atascocita Historical Society through the beneficence of a Houston woman who donated $7,500 towards publication. This was the culmination of a 20-year endeavor. A month after publication, Block was featured in an autograph party for this book at the Sam Houston Regional Library and Research Center in Liberty. W.T. received a $250 award last September for his book East Texas Mill Towns and Ghost Towns, Volume 1. The East Texas Historical Association selected the book for the Otis Locke Endowment's Best Book on East Texas History Award for 1995, although the book was published in 1994. The Piney Woods Foundation funded the book with a $50,000 grant. Volume 2 came out in September of this year, and Volume 3, the final book in the series, is scheduled for publication in 1996. My first efforts towards protecting W.T.'s legacy began 25 years ago when I created his first web domain, wtblock.com. About 12 years ago, I created a second domain called wtblock.org, which is a mirror site of the first domain. This is wtblock.com, my den at home. My concern 25 years later is there may not be anyone to maintain these sites when I'm no longer around. In addition to the prospect of the web domains going away, it is almost impossible to purchase W.T.'s books today. They are very rare, and people must spend hundreds of dollars to purchase one. I have known about Kindle books for a long time, but I never investigated publishing books on Kindle prior to this. My initial thought was to scan all 9 books and publish them as Kindle eBooks. Once I logged onto the website and set up an account, I quickly realized I had set my ambitions too low. Kindle turned out to be very easy to use, and it was not only used to publish ebooks, but books could also be published in paperback and hardcover formats. The Kindle Create Windows application had 2 useful options for creating ebooks. The above option, Print Replica, is the option I use for the books and manuscripts where the original computer files were not available. In this case, the book had to be scanned and assembled into a PDF file for publication on Kindle Create. The above option, Reflowable, is the option for a fully functional Kindle ebook using a Microsoft Word document. This is what a Kindle ebook looks like on my phone. This slide indicates the 8 character names of file and folders in the early to mid-1990s. WT told me he was deleting files after he was finished with them. I asked him not to do that, and I would archive the files for him to preserve space on his computer. The computers of that era could barely hold 20 digital photographs of today. Instead of deleting the files, he stored them in folders like garbage_1, garbage_2, etc. The problem then became converting the 8-character write file names into meaningfully named Microsoft Word documents. After doing so, I was able to reduce the 1,300-plus write files to 1168 Word files that were organized into folders of related content: Beaumont, Nederland, Sabine Pass, etc. I used uppercase titles to indicate files that have not been reformatted. This is a print replica in Amazon's terminology because it is a scanned duplication of the original book. Another print replica of the original book. The Sour Lake book was the last published book without the original computer files. This 3-book series was published as reflowable books since all the computer files were available. The original table of contents is on the left side. With the original computer files available, the books could be formatted in a modern style, and a detailed table of contents, right side, could be created for the books. The original books did not have an index. The new book has an index that begins on page 471 and ends on page 486. There were 8 unpublished manuscripts. Camp Wallace, December 1942. WT was under G2 investigation, which kept him at Camp Wallace for more than a year. I found this to be a fascinating insight into the life of a World War II volunteer. WT did not think he merited an autobiography, but he wanted to make a record for his children and grandchildren. This paragraph describes when WT discovered he was under some type of investigation. One of the things I found interesting is that the Army was using WT as a Spanish translator because he had 2 years of Spanish in high school. This was the first time I ever heard of anyone being able to speak a foreign language after only taking high school courses. Finally, about June 1st, 1943, WT received instructions over the telephone to report immediately to the Sergeant Major of the 28th Battalion. WT learns that the investigation did not result in his acceptance. If my great-grandfather had been born 6 months later, WT would have been a member of a 4-man team of spies to be dropped behind enemy lines. WT's autobiography is an extremely interesting book to read despite his comments to the contrary. For those of you who are interested in genealogy, you understand what this paragraph means to his future generations. My father met my mother in Germany after the war, which would not have happened if he had been selected to work for the CIC. I had a copy of this manuscript on my bookshelf, and I remember the first time I thumbed through it. My first thought was, what is the texture I am feeling on these pages? It is a letter-sized document composed of 576 pages that were written with a typewriter on front and back of each page. The texture I was feeling was from the impact of the typewriter on the paper, which was amplified by the fact that the typing was on front and back of each page. Not publishing this manuscript would have been the equivalent of burning it, in my opinion. On his lunch breaks, WT would go to the library and do this research on microfilm, transcribe the information into a spiral notebook, and at night would type up his notes. This was important research because most of the information in this manuscript was information that was lost to the Beaumont newspapers due to flooding resulting from local storms. It is clear to me why it was never published, because it was more of a research document than a formalized book, and the funding would not have been available for such a document. I had a copy of this manuscript on my bookshelf, and I'm not sure why it was never published. My assumption is that there was no funding available to make publication possible. The beauty of Kindle Direct Publishing is no funding is required, so I published it in October 2022. The Chronicles of Early Families of Nederland, Texas is a 5-book series that contained memoirs of several Nederland families. I did not have a copy of these books, so I had to scan the books here at the Tyrrell Library. The reason they were never published is probably because of the limited audience would not justify the cost. An article in the Mid-County Chronicle from September 23, 1992, announcing the release of these books. On the left is an image from the copy I scanned at Tyrrell Library. On the right is the recently published copy on Amazon. The original manuscript did not have an index. Volume 1 is the shorter of the 5 volumes, and its index spans pages 112 to 119. This slide compares the original Microsoft Write file with the equivalent Microsoft Word file published on Amazon. Maria Munson's writing was fun to read, and the following quotes illustrate two extremes: how different things were and how similar things were. Note the Boston Avenue sidewalk of wooden planks Mrs. Munson mentions in her writing. This quote illustrates how much has changed since that period. Purchased a nickel's worth of steak. Those words do not exist in our vocabulary today. Also, can you imagine sending a 5-year-old child to town to purchase your groceries? This quote illustrates how similar things were in that period. I can certainly remember going to school and being embarrassed by my clothes and my haircut. The last step in the process was to gather all the newspaper and magazine articles and organize them into books. WT spent a lot of time in Nederland because his mother had a home there. After WT's father died when he was 13 years old, they moved to Nederland where he graduated from high school. Many of the articles were presentations that WT gave to groups like I am doing here today. In this example, a presentation to the Nederland Rotary Club. WT grew up in Port Neches, but his father passed away when WT was 13 years old. WT's mother owned a home in Nederland, and the family moved into that house after Block died in 1933. WT graduated from Nederland High School. There were many articles that were not specific to a city, or there were too few articles about a city to merit its own book. The Texas Golden Triangle is a collection of those articles. The first chapter in the book is about the 1921 School Review of Jefferson County, Texas. The book contains photographs of schools, teachers, students, and administrators, and provides an interesting snapshot in time from 100 years ago. I was so fascinated by the document that I also published it. These are some other publications which indicate how obscure pieces of history can be preserved on Amazon. The 1921 School Review of Jefferson County, Texas. I did a search for Mary Sandal and could not find any information about her. The 1921 School Review of Jefferson County, Texas. Little Things, 78th Signal Company / 78th Infantry Division. NHS Pilot 1968. Publishing a high school annual is another example of how Amazon Kindle can be leveraged to preserve our heritage. In the past, it was very expensive to publish books, which resulted in numerous manuscripts never being published. Kindle Direct Publishing, KDP, provides a mechanism to allow anyone to publish at no cost but their time and effort. Individuals and organizations can now take advantage of this capability to publish documents that in the past were not practical to be published. George Santayana was a Spanish-American philosopher, essayist, poet, and novelist who lived from 1863 to 1952. He is best known for his aphorisms, such as, "Those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it," and "Only the dead have seen the end of war." He was also a prominent figure in the American pragmatist movement and a critic of idealism and rationalism. He developed a system of philosophy that he called critical realism, which combined naturalism, materialism, and skepticism. He wrote several influential books, such as The Life of Reason, The Sense of Beauty, and The Realms of Being. This presentation was given at the Tyrrell Historical Library in Beaumont, Texas, on January 19, 2024.